My name is Daniel Rowe, and 3 years ago, I was clinically dead for 11 minutes. I didn't see a tunnel of light. I didn't float above my body. What I saw, what I felt, was something else. Something I've spent every night since then trying not to dream about. I'd like to say I was a good man before it happened. Not perfect, but ordinary enough. 38 years old, divorced, a systems technician at a small utilities company in Maryland. I paid my bills, kept mostly to myself, and drank just enough to sleep. No drugs, no debts, no enemies. I wasn't religious. Didn't think much about the afterlife at all. The idea of hell belonged to Sunday school stories and late-night TV preachers. Until the day I died. It happened on a highway just outside Hagerstown. I'd been driving back from a routine inspection job, half asleep, half angry after another argument with my ex about visitation. The storm was building, fat gray clouds that smeared the windshield even with the wipers on high. I remember the song on the radio, some overplayed classic rock track. Then I remember nothing at all. Witnesses said a truck swerved into my lane. They found the impact mark on my side door, the crushed front axle, and the steering wheel folded like paper. Paramedics told me later that I was pulseless at the scene. They used the paddles twice. When the ambulance hit a bump, I started convulsing, then went completely still. That was when, by every medical measure, I ceased to be alive. But I wasn't gone. Not exactly. There was no sense of separation, no moment when I left my body. It was more like someone dimmed the world, layer by layer. Sound folded inward, then light, until there was only a thick silence that pressed on every side. I didn't think I was dead. I thought I was buried. The weight of it was so total, I couldn't tell whether my lungs had stopped or whether I'd forgotten how to breathe. And then I heard it. A low hum, distant but steady, like the vibration of machinery through concrete. It had rhythm, almost like language, but guttural, mechanical. When I tried to focus, it moved further away, luring me downward. I didn't walk or fall. The ground simply dissolved beneath me. The first thing I saw was light. Not heavenly light. This was dull metallic, yellowed at the edges like the glow of old sodium lamps. It illuminated a corridor that stretched further than I could see, the air thick with dust and something else. Heat, maybe, or breath. The floor was wet, though no water dripped from anywhere. I told myself it was a dream, my brain firing off dying signals, making sense of chaos. But the problem with that explanation was the coherence. The world was too organized, too deliberate. The corridor wasn't random. It had architecture, purpose. The hum grew louder. I realized it wasn't machinery at all. It was voices. Thousands of them, speaking the same word in perfect rhythm. It didn't sound like English or any language I knew, but the tone carried meaning downward. That's the closest translation I can offer. The sound itself pushed me forward. I passed through an archway into what I now call the first level. It felt like walking into the heart of a furnace, yet my skin didn't burn. The air shimmered, and the light dimmed to an amber haze. Around me, shadows moved, people, or what was left of them. Their outlines were distorted, like heat mirages, each locked in a repetitive motion. One man digging endlessly with his bare hands, a woman scrubbing invisible stains on the floor, a figure beating its fists against a wall that never cracked. None of them looked up. None of them made a sound. Every instinct screamed to help them, to shout, to run. But when I tried to move closer, the air thickened like syrup. My body resisted as though gravity had multiplied. A thought cut through the fog: you belong here. It wasn't spoken aloud, yet it filled my skull like static. I remembered the accident then. Metal screeching, glass breaking, and I wondered if these were other people who died violent deaths. Some ancient part of me hoped I might find recognition in their faces, but each one was faceless. Their features flickered and dissolved, as if the place refused to preserve identity. The ground began to tremble. I fell to my knees, and a warmth spread up through my palms, pulsing in time with my heartbeat, or what I thought was my heartbeat. The floor wasn't solid. It throbbed like living tissue. Every time it pulsed, I felt something tug behind my sternum, as if invisible threads were trying to draw me in. I don't know how long I knelt there. Time was meaningless. The air had no temperature anymore. My thoughts echoed, delayed by seconds, as if bouncing off unseen walls. Then the hum shifted pitch, rising into a sharp, painful frequency. The figures around me froze mid-motion. Slowly, they turned their heads toward me. Their faces, what replaced them, were mirrors. Not polished glass, but slick surfaces that reflected light without detail. In each reflection, I saw myself as I'd been, seatbelt digging into my chest, steering wheel bent, blood dripping from my scalp. But the expression staring back wasn't pain, it was apathy. The face of a man who'd stopped caring years before the crash. I tried to speak, but my mouth made no sound. Only the hum replied, now fractured and uneven. The figures began to disintegrate, their outlines breaking apart into flakes of ash that hovered in the heated air. One by one, they collapsed inward, swallowed by the floor. That's when I saw the cracks forming beneath me. Thin at first, then widening. Through them came a dull red glow, pulsing like magma. The wordless voices rose again, chanting in unison. The meaning was clearer this time. Continue. I didn't fall, I was taken. The sensation was like being unzipped from myself. Every nerve separated from bone, every thought pure pain. There was no pain, only the absolute certainty that resistance was impossible. I remember thinking absurdly that this must be what an insect feels as it's swallowed by a spider's web, struggling until it no longer remembers it once had limbs. Then, blackness again. When I opened my eyes, I was in another place, narrower, darker. The hum was gone, replaced by the distant sound of dripping water. My skin was slick, as if I'd been submerged. The air smelled of copper and mold. I tried to orient myself, but there were no walls, only shifting shapes in the dark, faintly luminous, writhing in and out of sight. A whisper slid past my ear. Not external, internal, first level. Indifference. The voice didn't belong to anyone I knew, yet it spoke with absolute authority. It told me I had moved through the first gate, that I'd witnessed the place where souls who waste their lives drift without will or memory. It said I had qualified. That word stuck with me, qualified. Like it wasn't punishment, but procedure. The whisper faded, and I was alone again. My legs felt heavy, but they moved when I commanded. I started walking, though. Walking isn't quite right. It was more like dragging myself through resistance thicker than air. Every step produced faint ripples of light that disappeared almost immediately. The sound of dripping grew louder. I followed it until I reached what looked like a staircase carved from stone. Its edges glistened with moisture, steps leading down into an even deeper void. Something inside me protested. I wasn't ready to go further. But when I turned, there was no corridor anymore, only endless dark pressing close behind. I looked down and saw a faint reflection in my own face, expressionless, eyes wide but vacant. The skin beneath my eyes was dark, my lips pale blue. I thought of morgue photos I'd seen once during a first aid certification course. I looked exactly like them. I should have panicked, but some calm had settled over me, a numb curiosity, like watching a film of my own death. The mind can only scream for so long before it starts to analyze. I told myself again this was neurological, a hallucination triggered by oxygen deprivation. The brain invents meaning when it dies. Still, another part of me, primitive, wordless, believed every second of it. I placed one hand on the first step. It was warm, pulsing faintly beneath my palm. I felt it, alive, waiting. The drip above me stopped. The air tightened. Before I could take the next step, something brushed my ankle. A small, deliberate touch. I looked down and saw a pale hand emerging from the darkness below. It gripped my leg, not violently, but firmly enough that I couldn't move. The skin of the hand was thin, translucent. Beneath it, veins glowed faintly, like embers under ash. The fingers were cold, impossibly strong. I pulled, but the hand didn't release. Another followed, then another, until 3, 4, 5 pale arms reached from the void, clutching at me. Not dragging me down, just holding me there. I froze. The whisper returned, closer now. They want what you still have. I didn't ask what that meant. I knew. The pulse inside my chest, the rhythm that wasn't supposed to exist anymore, throbbed harder. The hands trembled, tightening around me. Something deep below began to stir, a movement that rippled through the unseen space like a beast turning in its sleep. Then came a voice. Not in my head this time, but from far below, low enough to shake the steps. A single word: descend. The hands released me all at once. I stumbled forward, and my foot struck the next step. The warmth surged up through my body, flooding me with nausea and dread. The staircase began to move, spiraling downward as though the whole structure were rotating. The air filled with the sound of rushing wind, though nothing stirred. I tried to hold on to something, anything, but the steps kept shifting beneath me, each pulse drawing me deeper. The red glow returned, brighter now, staining the edges of my vision. I wasn't falling, I was being lowered, gently, deliberately, as if on display. And before the last trace of the first level disappeared above me, I heard the whisper again, final and calm: "There are 7. Then the light vanished. When I woke again, I thought I'd made it back. The first thing I felt was pressure, weight across my chest, air scraping my throat. I heard beeping, faint and arrhythmic. Somewhere close, someone was crying. I opened my mouth to speak, and nothing came out. For a few seconds, I believed I was alive. Then the beeping stopped, and the crying did too. I realized the air wasn't air at all. It was liquid, thick and cold, forcing itself into my lungs and then out again. I couldn't move. My body floated upright, held in place by something unseen. The darkness around me rippled like ink. Every small motion sent bubbles swirling past my face. That was when I understood I wasn't in a hospital. I hadn't come back. A faint light pulsed far below, casting thin silver streaks through the liquid. I squinted and saw that what I'd mistaken for water was more viscous, dense enough to slow everything it touched. Small shapes drifted past me: hair, teeth, a torn sleeve. Each fragment floated for a moment before dissolving. I tried to hold my breath, but there was no breath to hold. The liquid filled my lungs effortlessly, and somehow I didn't drown. It just circulated. The whisper returned, softer now, its tone almost conversational, second-level reflection. The word carried a tasty, metallic, bitter. I tried to find its source, but the liquid distorted every sound, every shimmer. My mind kept slipping between explanations. Part of me thought this was my brain processing trauma through dream imagery. Another part knew I was far beyond anything the mind could survive. Below, the light brightened. It wasn't a glow so much as a trembling, pale lines flickering across a floor I couldn't yet see. The whisper urged me downward, and my body obeyed without effort. I sank through the liquid, passing through layers of shifting temperature, cold, then colder, then burning. When my feet touched bottom, the substance around me drained away instantly. I found myself standing on a flat surface that looked like glass but pulsed faintly, as if it were breathing. The air smelled sterile, like disinfectant, electricity, and something faintly sweet beneath it, the scent of decay masked by perfume. The walls materialized around me, mirrors, infinite, perfect. They reflected my figure from every angle, each reflection moving just a fraction out of sync, as if the images were thinking independently, choosing when to follow. I turned my head, and one version of me didn't. It stared back with pupils too wide, expression unreadable. Another version smiled, slow and strained. The rest stood perfectly still. I told myself again that this was some neurological artifact of oxygen loss. The human brain often interprets mirrored or recursive imagery in states of trauma. But when I lifted my hand, the reflections responded with their own gestures. Not imitation, but communication. They traced words into the glass. At first, I couldn't read them. The letters smeared, reversed, multiplied. But as I stared, they organized themselves into a single line: "You had tam." I stepped closer. My reflection didn't mimic me. It tilted its head like it was studying something fragile. "You had time," I said aloud, though my voice came out as a distorted echo, half a second late. "What does that mean?" The reflection's lips moved, but not in sync. The echo whispered back, "You wasted it." The other reflections began to move too, writing their own phrases across the glass. Some scrawled in fog, others in what looked disturbingly like scratches carved by fingernails. "You had chances. You watched, you waited. You stopped trying." Each accusation landed with surgical precision, bypassing the logic I clung to. I wanted to deny them, to fight back. But the words came from my own voice, my own eyes. Every reflection knew the exact inventory of my failures. The divorce I'd stopped fighting for, the family I'd drifted away from, the father I hadn't visited before his stroke. The air vibrated, and all the mirrored versions spoke at once. One voice multiplied into hundreds, surrounding me. "We remember what you threw away." My knees buckled. I pressed my hands to my ears, but the sound was internal. The mirrors weren't showing ghosts or spirits, they were showing memory, the kind that never dies when the body does. The whisper intruded again, clinical. Detached reflection is the level of recognition. Here the living must face what they never corrected. The dead stay until they believe they deserved it. I shouted into the glass, though it came out more like a sob. I didn't deserve this, I didn't. The words echoed, splitting into fragments. Each reflection repeated them differently, twisting tone and meaning. I didn't. I deserve this. I didn't deserve. I did. It was like arguing with a chorus of myself, every possible version of guilt answering at once. My throat ached, but no sound left my mouth now. The mirrors began to fog from the inside, one by one. Shapes appeared behind the glass, people I recognized. My ex-wife, standing with her arms folded. My father, seated at his hospital bedside, eyes half-lidded. My mother, younger, hair darker, shaking her head at some long-past argument. They didn't move, didn't breathe, they just waited. I stepped forward until my nose nearly touched the mirror. The figure of my father leaned slightly closer. When his lips parted, the sound that came through wasn't his. It was the same whisper as before, now tinged with warmth. "You built your own hell long before you found it." Then the glass cracked. Hairline fractures spread outward, multiplying faster than I could step back. The noise of breaking echoed like distant thunder. Every reflection shuddered, splintered, then shattered at once, raining fragments that vanished before they touched the floor. The silence that followed was suffocating. I stood alone again, surrounded by nothing but the faint hum of something vast and hidden. I couldn't tell if I'd passed whatever test the level demanded, or if I'd failed. That's when I noticed the floor beneath my feet was changing. The translucent glass darkened, slowly absorbing light until it looked like frozen oil. Through it, faint ripples moved, shadows swimming in a deeper layer. I could feel their motion, subtle vibrations rising through my soles and into my bones. The hum returned, low and rhythmic, but it wasn't coming from outside. It pulsed from inside my chest. My body responded to it, aligning heartbeat to rhythm, sensing to something older than biology. The sensation was almost pleasant until I felt movement behind me. A shape emerged where no wall had been before. It wasn't a person exactly, more like a distortion in space, a fold of heat and light that resembled a human outline. The air bent around it. When it spoke, it didn't use sound. It simply altered the world enough for meaning to exist. "You are not done." The outline reached toward me. Its arm didn't extend so much as unfold, stretching across the space until its hand hovered inches from my chest. Instinct told me to step back, but there was nowhere to go. The moment its fingers brushed my sternum, the hum spiked, and every muscle in my body seized. I didn't see the next transition. I felt it. The floor gave way, not in collapse, but in surrender. Gravity shifted direction, folding me inward through myself. The voice whispered as I fell, "Reflection ends where awareness begins." When I opened my eyes, I was kneeling on something coarse. Gravel, maybe. My hands came away coated in fine gray dust. The air was colder here, sharp enough to sting when I inhaled. Above me stretched a sky with no light source, dim, metallic, static. Rows of what I thought were rocks extended into the distance. But as my eyes adjusted, I realized they were kneeling figures, motionless, their heads bowed. Each was bound by chains made of the same glassy material I'd seen earlier. The links were fused into the ground, yet every so often one would twitch, as if trying to move and remembering it couldn't. I didn't feel watched, but I wasn't alone. Something heavy lingered behind my perception, a weight that made the air hum like the aftermath of thunder. I thought of the word hell again. If this was hell, it wasn't fire and torture, it was realization. A structure built not from punishment but recognition. And then, faint but clear, the whisper again, "You have reached the third." I froze. I hadn't moved, hadn't chosen to descend. Yet somehow, The next level had found me anyway. A figure nearby lifted its head. Its eyes were hollow, but the face... God, the face was my own, older, worn, skin cracked by years of cold. It stared straight through me. I took a step back, but my foot struck something hard, a ring embedded in the ground, attached to a chain leading nowhere. I didn't dare follow it with my eyes, but I heard it move, metal scraping against stone. The whisper grew closer, now a dozen voices overlapping, third-level conviction. I wanted to ask what that meant, but my mouth wouldn't open. My jaw felt wired shut, as if silence was part of the rule here. The rows of kneeling figures began to tremble, heads lifting in eerie unison. Their eyes glowed faintly with the same dull light as the sky. Each one whispered a single word, low but clear: stay. I realized then what conviction meant, not belief, not guilt. It meant the refusal to move. I felt the ground shift under me again, just enough to force balance. Every instinct told me not to kneel, not to mimic them, not to give in to the gravity of this place. But the longer I stood, the heavier I became. My knees bent on their own. The voice that had guided me through the first 2 levels was silent now. No warning, no explanation, only the rhythmic chant of hundreds of versions of myself, repeating that same word until it merged into one sound, vibrating, endless. Stay. I fought it until my legs locked, trembling, half bent. My spine screamed with pressure. The dust around me swirled, forming faint spirals that matched my heartbeat. Somewhere deep below, something shifted again. An acknowledgement, maybe approval. And just before the light faded, I felt breath at my ear, cold and certain: you will not stay long. Then the world dissolved once more, and the descent continued. When I came back to awareness, I was standing. No pain, no cold, no weight. Just an immense stillness, like time had paused mid-inhale. The dust that had covered the last level was gone. The air here was clean, almost sterile, and faintly luminous, as if the atmosphere itself emitted light. For a moment, I thought I'd surfaced somewhere above the nightmare. There was sky again, pale, nearly white, but it had no horizon. It just expanded endlessly, featureless and depthless, like standing inside a photograph that refused to focus. My clothes were gone. My body looked normal, but too perfect. No scars, no bruises, no sign of the crash. I flexed my hands and felt strength unnatural and precise. That's when I noticed I wasn't breathing. My chest moved, but it was only mimicry, an automatic gesture. The silence was so complete it had texture. It pressed against my ears until I started to hear things that weren't there: a heartbeat, the scrape of shoes, wind. None existed. Then came a voice. Clear and unhurried, 4th-level ambition. I spun around, searching for its source. The sound came from everywhere at once, the way an idea does when it lands fully formed in your mind. The light shifted, and I saw shapes forming in the distance, structures that shouldn't have been visible but were. Skyscrapers. Hundreds of them, stretching into the blank sky. They weren't built of glass or steel, but something that resembled bone polished to ivory. Windows were mere black slits. I could see movement behind some of them. Flickers of silhouettes pacing rooms, gesturing, shouting without sound. I started walking toward the nearest tower, each step echoing faintly even though there was no surface hard enough to carry sound. The ground wasn't ground at all. It felt like walking across a giant drum, each step producing a hollow reverberation that disappeared instantly. At first, I thought the towers were abandoned. Then I reached the threshold of the first and realized they weren't empty. They were occupied by echoes. Through a thin slit of a window I saw myself. Or rather, a version of me, older, successful, dressed in a suit I'd never owned, standing before a crowd. The room behind the glass was filled with people frozen mid-applause. My reflection's lips moved, and I understood what he was saying even without hearing it. Finally, I stepped back, and the glass dissolved. The scene vanished. Everywhere I turned, other towers shimmer with similar fragments, moments that could have been. In one, I was holding a patent certificate; in another, shaking hands with someone important; in a third, giving a lecture at a university. Lives that branched away from the one I'd lived, each built on a single different decision. The whisper returned: ambition is not sin. It is motion without measure. I looked up. The skyscrapers were still rising, growing taller as I watched. The sight made me dizzy. There was no wind, yet they swayed, bending imperceptibly inward as if studying me. I felt it then. That quiet ache humans mistake for drive. The pull toward more. The ground began to tilt, drawing me toward a spiral path leading deeper into the maze of towers. I walked without intending to. Each step carried an illusion of choice. Every few meters, the structures changed style, modern to Gothic to ancient stone fortresses, each occupied by another version of me. I saw one hunched over a desk, writing furiously while pages caught fire around him, another commanding a team in a control room that looked like a space station, another sitting alone in a mansion, surrounded by trophies that shimmered like molten metal. Somewhere between fascination and dread, I realized none of them looked happy. They were animated but hollow, eyes fixed on goals that never arrived. I tried to speak, to call to one of them, but the moment I did, every version stopped moving. Hundreds of heads turned in unison toward me, their mouths opened at once, and a soundless scream rippled through the air. The pressure hit me like a wave. My vision blurred. I stumbled backward, covering my ears though the noise existed only inside my skull. The buildings vibrated, their surfaces fracturing as if reacting to my intrusion. The whisper broke through the chaos, cold and surgical. This is the level of endless pursuit. Every thought that begins with, F only. I wanted to argue that I hadn't been that ambitious, that my life had been small, forgettable. But even as I thought it, another memory surfaced, the quiet resentment I'd carried every day, the conviction that I'd been meant for something more and somehow cheated of it. I'd blamed my ex, my job, the town, even fate. The towers around me cracked open like shells. Inside each, that same resentment took form. Figures poured out. Hundreds of Daniels, each with slight differences. One heavier, one thinner, one with a limp, one clean-shaven. They crowded the street, whispering in perfect synchronization you could have. They surrounded me but didn't touch. The heat from their bodies was unreal, suffocating. Each one leaned close enough for their words to slide directly into my thoughts. You could have been better. You could have left sooner. You could have tried harder. You could have mattered. It was maddening because they were all right. I had wasted most of my life standing still, angry at outcomes I never pursued properly. One of them reached out and placed a hand on my shoulder. Its touch was weightless but absolute. The rest froze, eyes flickering. Do you still want more? It asked, not aloud, but inside me. The question wasn't rhetorical. I felt the answer form before I could stop it. Yes. The figure smiled, not kindly, not cruelly, just knowingly, and whispered, then down. The ground shattered, every tower folded inward, collapsing in a silent implosion that drew me with it. I fell not fast, not slow, just perpetually. Through each layer I passed, fragments of the structures reassembled into smaller shapes, ladders, stairs, ropes, each representing some attempt at escape that failed before it began. My descent ended abruptly on a floor of cold iron. The smell of rust hit instantly. I pushed myself up and found chains scattered across the surface, broken, but not empty. Some still held shadows that pulsed faintly, outlines of people repeating the same motion, reaching upward toward invisible ceilings. The whisper was distant now, but its words were clear. Fifth level control. The air hummed with static. Electricity crackled through the chains, making them twitch. A dull light pulsed from somewhere above, illuminating machinery that seemed built from both flesh and metal. Gears turned without connection, pistons drove nothing. It reminded me of the power stations I'd inspected in life. Systems designed to run indefinitely, even after purpose was forgotten. One of the shadows near me spoke. Its voice was dry, like leaves grinding together. We kept things working, it said. That's what they wanted. I asked who they were. The figure didn't answer, just stared with hollow sockets that glowed faintly blue. Another figure nearby repeated the same motion, word for word. What kept things working? Rows of them filled the space, each murmuring identical phrases, loops of responsibility stripped of meaning. It struck me that this wasn't punishment for dominance or cruelty. It was for control that never trusted the world to exist without your hand on the switch. Every person here had clung to order long after it mattered. I felt a vibration through the floor, deep, rhythmic. The machinery above responded, gears grinding faster, shadows jerking as if pulled by invisible strings. I stumbled backward and found myself pressed against a massive lever jutting from the ground. The base of it throbbed with light, pulsing like a heartbeat. Without thinking, I reached for it. The instant my hand touched the metal, a surge of warmth shot through me. The shadows froze. The whisper returned near my ear now, intimate. If you pull it, you can stop all of this. The lever vibrated beneath my fingers. Every instinct screamed to act, to control, to fix, to end. I tightened my grip, muscles straining. Then something small but certain flickered inside me, recognition. This was the same reflex that had driven every mistake I'd ever made, trying to impose order where surrender was required. I released the lever. The hum immediately quieted. The machinery slowed until the silence returned, fuller than before. Somewhere in that silence, something approved. The whisper spoke again, almost a breath. Understanding is not escape, but it moves you on. The ground softened beneath me, iron turning to dust, dust to nothing. I felt myself sinking once more, not pulled but permitted. Before darkness claimed the last trace of light, I saw the figures kneeling again, repeating their endless mantra, each convinced they still held the world together. As I slipped away, one last voice, not the whisper this time, but my own, echoed faintly, "You were never in control." Then everything vanished. There was no impact this time. No transition, no drop. Just a slow fade from dark to darker, until I realized the dark had texture. It wasn't absence but density. A slow-moving, breathable ink that shifted when I moved. The first thing I saw was my own outline, faint and gray, like someone had traced me in fog. The second thing I saw was movement, reflections of myself stepping forward while I stood still. Then I heard breathing, not mine, a crowd's, close, synchronized, deliberate. The whisper came late, its voice rasped and dry, sixth-level understanding. The irony hit immediately. There was nothing to understand here. Just repetition, noise pretending to be meaning. But the word, understanding, hung in the air like a command. Shapes began to form from the ink. At first, they were blurs. Then they took on outlines, resolving into a circle of figures surrounding me. Each was familiar, each was me, 7 of them in total. They stood at equal distance, unmoving, heads bowed slightly as though waiting for something. One of them stepped forward, identical in height, build, even the small scar on the right temple I'd earned as a teenager. His eyes were calm. "You're getting close," he said. I didn't answer. "You've seen indifference," he continued. "You've faced reflection, conviction, ambition, control. You think there's a pattern, a logic." He smiled faintly, as if amused by my silence. "There isn't. The mind arranges chaos into ladders because it can't stand falling forever." Behind him, the others shifted, faint murmurs rippling through them. Their voices merged into one rhythmic hum that sounded suspiciously like my own thoughts echoing. "What are you?" I asked. The first one tilted his head. "We're what you keep explaining away." The statement stung in a way words shouldn't, because it was true. Throughout every stage, I'd rationalized the horror. Oxygen deprivation, cortical decay, dying neurons replaying images from memory. It kept me sane, but it also kept me separate. The first figure began circling me slowly. The ink beneath his feet stirred in perfect rings. "You don't believe in hell," he said, "so you built one that requires your belief to exist." The others began to move too, orbiting in perfect rhythm, forming a slow, spiraling current that pulled the air inward. I felt weight gather at my chest again. Not pain, but gravity. The same force that had dragged me down each time before. I said, almost to myself, "If this is hell, what comes next?" The man who spoke for the others paused. "You tell us." He stepped closer until our foreheads nearly touched. "Understanding isn't about truth. It's about limits. How much can you see before you stop pretending it's still explainable?" The scene rippled. The figures blurred, expanding outward until I stood inside a circular room that resembled a hospital corridor. Pale tile floors, the faint smell of disinfectant. Overhead lights flickering in intervals that didn't match any electrical rhythm. I recognized the place. The Hagerstown Hospital Trauma Ward. I'd been here after a fall years ago. Same hallway, same buzzing hum from the lights, except now every door lining the corridor was open, and from each one came a sound. Breathing, whispering, coughing, crying. The noises layered over each other until the air itself vibrated. My doubles were gone. In their place, the hospital filled with versions of everyone I'd ever known. Co-workers, family, some alive, some long dead. Each one stood in their doorway motionless. I walked forward. Their eyes followed me. Every face carried a different emotion: pity, confusion, accusation. Some smiled faintly, others wept. No one spoke. Halfway down the corridor, I heard my name. Not shouted, just spoken softly. Daniel. I turned. The voice belonged to my father. He stood in one of the doorways, wearing the same flannel shirt he'd died in. His expression was gentle, more than it ever was in life. "You finally figured it out," he said. My throat closed. "Figured what out?" He gestured around. "This isn't punishment. It's compression. Everything you refuse to feel in life all at once. It has to pass through you before you can go anywhere." "Go where?" He didn't answer. Instead, he placed a hand on my shoulder. The contact was solid, real. The warmth that spread from it wasn't comforting. It was unbearable. Every memory I'd buried began pushing up at once. The hospital waiting room after his stroke, the voicemail I hadn't returned, the things left unsaid because pride felt safer than love. I wanted to pull away, but his grip tightened. "Understanding isn't relief," he said softly. "It's pressure until you dissolve." Then he stepped back into the doorway, and the room behind him filled with light, so bright it hurt to look at. His silhouette had faded and vanished. The corridor darkened again. I started running. Doors slammed shut as I passed, each one sealed with a heavy finality, like decisions I couldn't undo. The air thickened, turning viscous. My legs moved slower and slower until I was forcing through molasses. The whisper returned. Not the voice of my father, not the doubles, but the original one, the thing that had narrated every descent. Its tone had changed, no longer detached or guiding, almost patient. "You wanted clarity. Here it is." The walls began to breathe, literally expand and contract. The white tiles bowed outward, glowing faintly from within. Beneath the surface, I saw shapes, spines, ribs, veins, anatomical architecture moving with mechanical rhythm. "You built meaning out of your own decay," the whisper said. "Every level was a nerve, every memory a signal. Understanding means seeing what you've been living inside of." I reached the end of the corridor. There was no door, just a single glass panel showing what looked like a body lying on a table. Tubes, monitors, blue sheets. My chest rose and fell shallowly. A nurse leaned over, checking vitals. Someone else, maybe a doctor, adjusted equipment. Their movements were calm, rehearsed. It took a moment to register what that meant. I was still there, still on, being worked on. The whisper exhaled beside me. "You aren't dying, Daniel. You're being emptied." The scene through the glass began to blur, rippling like heat. I pressed my palms against it. The surface was warm, almost soft. My pulse sensed with the monitor's distant beeping. "Let me go back," I said, voice shaking. "You will," it answered. "But not all of you." I felt the temperature rise. The glass thinned until it was membrane more than barrier. Light seeped through, blinding and absolute. Behind it, the medical staff froze mid-motion, suspended. The whisper came closer now, too close. "You've reached the border. One more layer and you'll wake up. But you won't like where you end up." "What's the last level?" I asked. Silence. Then, finally, the seventh is belief. The light shattered outward, pulling me through like water bursting a dam. I gasped, not metaphorically but literally, as air rushed into lungs that suddenly existed again. For a split second, everything was noise and color. Beeping monitors, shouting voices, the crack of defibrillator pads hitting chest. I was back. I tried to sit up, but the world tilted. Hands pinned me down. My throat ached. A voice above me said, "He's stabilizing. Keep pressure here." I blinked hard. The lights were wrong. Too bright, too geometric. My mind lagged several seconds behind reality. I couldn't tell whether I was truly awake or just simulating what waking should feel like. Someone leaned over. A nurse, young, hair tied back. "Daniel, can you hear me?" I nodded weakly. "You were gone for 11 minutes, she said. "But we got you back." I wanted to ask her what that meant, but my tongue wouldn't move. I turned my head instead and froze. Standing in the corner of the trauma bay was a figure, unmoving, half in shadow. Familiar posture. Same height, same face. No one else reacted. The nurse didn't look up. The doctor didn't see it, but I did. The figure met my eyes and mouthed something I couldn't hear. 7 letters. I knew them immediately. Muli. Then it was gone. The machines continued beeping. The medical team's voices blurred into background static. My vision dimmed, not from unconsciousness, but from a slow, creeping certainty. I hadn't escaped the 7th level. I just carried it back with me. When I opened my eyes again, daylight poured through the window. Not hospital, white fluorescent, but real sunlight. Warm, angled, heavy with dust motes. For a moment, that light alone convinced me I'd survived. The monitors beside my bed blinked in soft rhythm. My chest rose and fell with effort but consistency. I could taste the chemical tang of oxygen tubing, hear the shuffle of someone riding nearby. "You're awake," a voice said. I turned. A woman in pale blue scrubs looked up from a chart, mid-40s, tired eyes, gentle posture. "You scared us," she said, smiling faintly. "Flatlined for 11 minutes. We don't usually get to talk to people who beat those odds." Her badge read Dr. Neary. She set the clipboard down and approached the bed. "Do you remember what happened?" I nodded slightly. "Car crash, right? They said it was a miracle the EMTs got you this far. You've been unconscious for 4 days. 4 days. The number hit like a physical blow. For me, it had been what? A century. 7 eternities stacked into a pattern I still didn't understand. The doctor checked my vitals, made small notes, then said lightly, "We're moving you to step down care this afternoon. You'll feel groggy, maybe disoriented. It's normal after prolonged hypoxia." I wanted to ask her whether patients ever remembered anything from the dead space, those 11 minutes, but I couldn't. The words stuck somewhere behind my teeth, where that last whisper still lived. When she left, I stared at the ceiling tiles, tracing the faint water stains that formed almost recognizable shapes. Faces, nearly. Every few seconds the monitor blipped beside me, grounding me in rhythm. Except it wasn't consistent. Every so often between beats, I'd hear another sound layered beneath it, quieter. A second pulse, slightly out of sync. At first, I thought it was mechanical interference. Then I realized it was my heartbeat, doubling for a split second before correcting, like 2 versions of me trying to occupy the same timing. That's when I started to notice the changes. They were small at first. The air vents in the room made a faint hum, not the usual steady white noise, but a low, pulsing tone. Every time it throbbed, the sunlight shifted slightly, warming then cooling, as if sensed to a distant rhythm I couldn't hear but could feel. When I looked toward the window, I realized the light wasn't moving across the blinds. It was breathing. I closed my eyes tight, opened them again. Everything normal, but the moment I blinked, there it was again, just for a fraction of a second. The same red tint from the 4th level, buried in the sunlight. Later that day, they wheeled me into a quieter room down the hall. No roommate, just machines and silence. I could finally sit up without feeling the world tilt. A nurse named Heather came in to check my drip. She chatted kindly, routine talk about morphine dosage, discharge expectations, insurance forms. But the whole time, I couldn't stop glancing at the far corner of the room. Someone was standing there. Same height, same outline, motionless. Every time Heather turned her head, the figure flickered and vanished. When she faced me again, it returned, like it existed only in the periphery, unwilling to be seen directly. I asked her if anyone had been visiting earlier. She shook her head. "Just me and Dr. Neary since you woke." The monitor beeped faster. That night, I couldn't sleep. My dreams weren't dreams. They were repeats. The corridors, the chains, the mirrored rooms. Except now I was walking through them while conscious, recognizing them as constructs of memory. Every wall hummed with a pulse that matched the machines beside my bed. Around midnight, the lights dimmed automatically. I turned on my side, staring at the dark window. A faint reflection looked back. not my own. The same shadow stood behind the glass, mouthing the same word it had in the trauma bay. Bellevue, I whispered back. What? In what? No answer. But the reflection smiled, faintly, an expression that was half sympathy, half warning. Then it lifted its hand and pointed downward. Something beneath the hospital vibrated just once, a deep tremor like a subway train passing below. The window pane shook. When the sound faded, I could still feel it in my chest. A slow, subterranean heartbeat that wasn't mine. I pressed the call button. Heather appeared within minutes, rubbing her eyes. Everything okay? Did you feel that? The vibration. She frowned. No tremors reported. You sure it wasn't the bed motor? I started to insist, but she gave me a practiced smile, the kind nurses reserve for patients they're humoring. She checked the monitor, adjusted the AV, and left me with a cup of ice chips. Alone again, I listened. Nothing, just the faint whir of the ventilator 2 rooms over. But at 20:11 a.m., the monitor flatlined for a single impossible second. The tone cut through the silence. My body froze. Then, just as suddenly, the rhythm returned normal, steady. The machine didn't register the interruption. I looked toward the corner, empty. I whispered, I believe. The air in the room stilled. Something unseen leaned close enough that I could feel its breath. Cold, precise, intimate. It spoke in a voice that wasn't sound but vibration, the same resonance from the 6th level. Then you understand what comes next. I didn't answer. Belief is not survival, it's invitation. The temperature dropped 5 degrees in seconds. Frost formed on the metal railings of the bed. My breath turned visible. I pressed the nurse call again, but the button light didn't activate. The monitor still blinked, steady, indifferent. And then I saw it, movement inside the glass of the heart monitor screen. Reflections twisting behind the digits. Faces. Hundreds of them. Small and faint, each mouthing the same word in unison down. My pulse spiked. The numbers rose to 130, 140, 156. The alarm went off. The door burst open. Dr. Neary and 2 nurses rushed in, shouting orders. Arrhythmia! Get him on all! Now, I felt the oxygen mask press over my mouth, heard the shuffle of feet. But beneath all that chaos, another rhythm pulsed. A deeper, hidden one, sensing perfectly with mine until I couldn't tell which belonged to me. The figure was back, standing behind Dr. Neary. She didn't see it. None of them did. It leaned forward, resting its hands on her shoulders. Its fingers sank straight through the fabric, as though she were transparent. When it spoke, the entire room dimmed. You are already there. The heart monitor blared again. Numbers dropped 88, 61, 39. Someone shouted for epinephrine. I tried to fight it, to stay. But belief had become gravity, and gravity always wins. For one bright instant, I felt myself split again. 2 existences diverging. One body convulsing beneath hospital lights, another standing in darkness, watching. The second me turned. Behind him stretched the same staircase from the beginning, endless, breathing red. I heard my father's voice somewhere far below. You wanted to know where it ends. And above that, the whisper, now vast everywhere, it never ends, Daniel. It loops. I gasped. The sound became an alarm, dragging me back. When I woke again, morning sunlight filled the room. The staff had gone. My monitors were silent. The lines disconnected. On the bedside tray lay a single folded note. No name, no hospital letterhead, just plain paper, creased once. I opened it. 7 words written in shaky handwriting that wasn't mine. We only leave when belief stops breathing. My heart rate monitor flickered, then steadied on its own, 72 beam normal. But every few seconds, between beats, a faint echo still whispered from inside the machine. Soft, measured, eternal down. They released me 5 days later. I walked out of Hagerstown General wearing donated clothes. Jeans that didn't fit, a sweatshirt with the logo of a local church I'd never been to. Dr. Neary said my heart was stable, my scans were clear, and I was remarkably fortunate. I nodded through her warnings about cardiac rehab, phantom sensations, and post-resuscitation hallucinations. I didn't tell her the hallucinations had already followed me home. The first night back, the house was unfamiliar. I'd lived there 6 years, but every angle felt rearranged. The light switches weren't where my hand expected them. The hum of the fridge was half a note off. Even the air seemed thicker, like the atmosphere hadn't reset since I left. I turned on every lamp, checked every lock, then sat on the couch and waited for something ordinary to happen. An ad on TV, a passing car, the smell of neighbors cooking. Nothing did. The neighborhood was silent, streets empty. Not late night quiet, absence. When I finally slept, I dreamed of the hospital hallway. Same walls, same flickering lights, but now the doors opened outward, spilling that thick ink black air from the 6th level. Each door bore a number from 1 to 7. They pulsed in rhythm with my heart. When I woke, the numbers stayed behind my eyelids, burning faintly. Over the next few days, I tried to resume life. Groceries, laundry, phone calls. People spoke to me like I'd come back from vacation. My ex sent a cautious text, "Saw your name in the paper. Glad you're okay." I started typing a reply, something polite and safe, but halfway through the message the phone died. Screen black, battery full. When it came back on, my draft was gone. The Notes app was open instead. 7 new entries, each titled by one word: indifference, reflection, conviction, ambition, control, understanding, belief. I hadn't written the first. I found a single sentence: "You left pieces behind." The others were blank. That night the house began to click. Tiny pops in the walls, in the pipes, like a cooling engine after long use. Except it never stopped. The rhythm matched my pulse again, that double beat I couldn't escape. At 20:11 a.m., the exact time my heart had stopped in the hospital, every light went out. I froze. Listening, the hum returned low, mechanical, alive. From the hallway, a red glow crept under the bedroom door. I didn't move. Couldn't. When I finally opened the door, the glow vanished instantly, replaced by the pale blue wash of moonlight. But something had changed. The framed photo at the end of the hall, the one of my parents at a lake, was flipped backward, the stand bent as if twisted by heat. I told myself I'd done it absent-mindedly while unpacking. I wanted so badly to believe that. The next morning, I found the note again, the one from the hospital tray. It hadn't been in my bag when I left, yet here it was on the kitchen table, perfectly folded. Same sentence, same shaky handwriting. "We only leave when belief stops breathing." I crumpled it, threw it away, took out the trash. An hour later, it was back on the table. Unfolded this time, I stopped trying to explain it. On the 4th day home, the hospital called. Dr. Neary's voice was strained. "Daniel, are you feeling all right?" "I'm fine. I only asked because, well, something strange came up in your record. Your ECG logs from the night you flatlined, they keep reprinting. We've deleted the duplicates 3 times, but they appear again. Always time-stamped 2:11 a.m. She hesitated. "The technicians are joking that you're haunting our server." I didn't laugh. That night I unplugged every clock, every electronic that ticked. I sat in the living room with nothing but candlelight. I made it to 2010. My pulse stayed steady. Then, just as the second hand would have crossed to 2:11, every candle flame bent sideways. A gust of wind that came from nowhere. In that instant, I saw something flicker in the window reflection. A figure in the yard, me again or close enough. Same posture, same slouch. But this version wasn't still. It was walking backward toward the tree line, one step every few seconds, eyes locked on mine through the glass. I opened the door and shouted, "Stop!" The air outside was colder than winter. My breath fogged instantly. The figure halted at the edge of the yard. I stepped forward, barefoot, gravel biting. "What do you want?" It raised its hand and pointed, not at me, but at the sky. I looked up. For a heartbeat, the stars rearranged themselves into a shape. 7 points connected by faint red lines. The same pattern I'd seen on the hospital monitors when they flatlined. Then the stars flickered back to normal. When I looked down, the yard was empty. I went back inside and locked the door, but my footprints in the dew stopped halfway to the porch, as if I'd vanished mid-step. From then on, the loop began. Every night at 20:11, no matter what I did, sleep, wake, travel, distract myself, the temperature dropped, the hum returned, and I'd hear the faint voice from somewhere below the floorboards whispering down. I tore up the carpet, checked the crawl space. Nothing. The sound wasn't physical. It was under reality itself, like static leaking through dimensions. By the 7th night, exhaustion won. I sat in the dark kitchen, staring at the note that refused to stay gone. The red glow returned, not from under the door this time, but from inside the refrigerator, spilling through the thin crack of the seal. I opened it. Inside, every surface was covered in frost. Letters traced through it from the inside out. 7 words, same as before. We only leave when belief stops breathing. But below that, a new line. Freshly etchy, you still believe. I closed the door. The hum stopped. For the first time in days' silence, the next morning, I packed a bag. I didn't know where I was going, only that I couldn't stay. The house wasn't mine anymore. It was just another level, another reflection pretending to be real. I drove west, no destination, radio off. The highway looked exactly like the night of the crash. Same gray clouds, same song faintly humming from a nearby car. Around sunset, I pulled into a rest stop outside Cumberland. I needed coffee air, something solid. The attendant glanced up as I walked in. "You all right, buddy? You look pale." "I just need caffeine." He poured me a cup, handed it over. "You from Hagerstown?" "Yeah." He smiled thinly. "Had a fella in here last night, said the same thing. Looked just like you." I froze.
What time?
He checked the register log. Little after 2. When I left the building, I scanned the lot. Only my car waited under the flickering streetlight. The reflection in its driver's side window wasn't mine. The figure inside was smiling faintly, hands on the wheel. I turned away, walked back toward the store. When I looked again, the car was empty. I drove until dawn, then pulled over at a small motel. I hadn't slept more than an hour when the phone rang. No number on the screen, I answered. My own voice spoke back. "You're not done." "Who is this?" "You know." "What do you want?" "To stop believing." The line clicked dead. I sat there for a long time, phone pressed to my ear, the word looping silently, believe, believe, believe. When I finally lowered the phone, the motel clock read 20:10 again. I stood by the window, staring into the darkness. A faint red light pulsed in the distance, low to the ground, slow and steady. Not a car, not a tower beacon. It blinked exactly once every 7 seconds. A warning or a heartbeat, either way, it was waiting. By the 8th night, I'd stopped counting days. Sleep no longer came in hours, but in fragments. 30 seconds, maybe a minute at a time, just enough to blur one world into the next. Every time my eyes closed, I was back in some corridor of the levels. Not dreams, memories on replay, except now they bled into the waking world. I'd drive past a gas station and see its windows flicker red. The sound of the coffee maker in a diner would sync perfectly with the pulse I could never escape. People's reflections moved half a second too late, always looking directly at me instead of themselves. And the word kept returning everywhere. Billboards, receipts, road signs, Beale. It wasn't a message anymore. It was a diagnosis. I was in a cheap motel outside of Elkins, West Virginia, when the loop finally tightened. The room smelled of mildew and detergent, carpet still damp from an unfinished cleaning. I sat on the bed with the curtains drawn, phone unplugged, everything turned off. No clocks, no light. Still the air pulsed. It was 20:11 a.m. I didn't need a clock to know. My heartbeat began sensing to that deeper rhythm again. One beat of mine, one beat not mine. I whispered into the dark, "If you're here, say something." The whisper answered instantly, too close to my ear. We never left. The walls shivered. Paint cracked in a slow circle around the doorframe, flaking in perfect rhythm with my pulse. The temperature dropped, and frost formed over the mirror above the dresser. I stood. "What do you want from me?" The answer came as a vibration through the floorboards. Consistency. The mirror's surface rippled. Beneath the frost, shapes began to appear. Figures kneeling, the same ones I'd seen in the 3rd level. They mouthed the word that had been waiting since the first fall. "Down." I said it aloud this time. "Down." The word carried weight. The floor groaned. The walls bent slightly inward, the air thickening like the moments before a storm. And then the ground simply gave up. The carpet folded open like fabric parting underwater, and I dropped through it quietly, smoothly, like falling into the space between breaths. When I landed, I was standing in my living room, but not the real one. This version was darker, the furniture slightly wrong. Shadows were too long, corners too deep. The TV hummed though it was off. On the table lay the hospital note, unfolded. The handwriting had changed, now smooth, deliberate. "You made it home." I turned slowly. The reflection of myself from the window stood in the doorway, still and patient. "You can stop now," it said. Its voice was calm, uninflected. "You don't have to keep descending." I took a step closer. I thought there were 7 levels. The reflection nodded. "There are. You brought the last one with you." It pointed upward. Through the ceiling, faint light flickered, the same pale glow of the hospital lamps. "You think hell is below. But the loop doesn't care which direction you fall. I'm alive. Parts of you are." The reflection walked forward. Each step left a faint red footprint on the floor. Belief keeps you alive, but it also keeps us alive. I backed toward the wall. Yes, every version that needed to believe something different. The one who blamed the crash on the truck driver. The one who thought it was fate. The one who thought it was punishment. The one who thought it was nothing at all. It smiled faintly. "They're all breathing through you now." The air behind it shimmered, and the other reflections appeared. 7 of them total, standing in a loose circle. Each wore a different expression: you anger, grief, confusion, apathy, hunger, serenity, faith. They began to hum together, the sound low and steady. "Why?" I whispered. "Because this is how belief works," the first said. "You don't escape it. You replicate it." The hum built into a deep vibration that rattled the picture frames. The note on the table caught fire, flames without heat, curling the edges into ash. The words burned last: "We only leave when belief stops breathing." I tried to shout, but the air solidified in my throat. The room twisted, walls bending like fabric caught in wind. The ceiling split open, revealing a dark sky pulsing with faint red veins of light. The 7 reflections turned their faces upward, mouths open, inhaling. "Stop!" I yelled. The first turned back to me. "You asked what hell meant," it said. "It isn't punishment. It's repetition. The place where every belief about the end creates another beginning." The floor split. Through the cracks came light, blinding hospital white. I saw myself again on the table, monitors flashing, Dr. Neary pressing on my chest. The beeping slowed. "Not again," I whispered. "Always again." The reflection said. "That's what belief is. Life refusing to admit it's finished." The hospital light surged, pulling me upward through the cracks. For a moment, I felt air in my lungs again, sterile and cold. I heard the familiar chaos of medical voices. "He's seizing. Hold him down. His vitals are dropping." I tried to speak, to warn them, to tell them not to bring me back. But every sound I made came out as that single cursed word. "Down." Then everything froze. Dr. Neary looked up sharply, like she'd heard it too. Her face went pale. "What did he just—" Before she could finish, the monitors flatlined. The hum returned. And I understood, with a kind of detached calm, that this wasn't the same resuscitation. This was the echo, the one that had always followed the original, the loop completing its orbit. I could feel both places at once, the body on the hospital bed and the one standing in the shadow of the 7 reflections. The same heartbeat, beating twice. The whisper, my oldest companion, spoke again, no longer behind or above, but inside every sound, stay in the loop permanently. The hospital light dimmed. The reflections stepped forward. Each touched my shoulder, and every memory, the corridor, the machinery, the glass, the chains, collapsed inward until there was nothing but one long, steady pulse. Then silence. When I opened my eyes, I was standing on a roadside at dusk. The crash site, the wreckage was gone. The asphalt was clean, grass freshly grown over the ditch. A small roadside cross leaned near the guardrail, its paint fading. My name carved into the wood. The air was still. No wind, no sound of cars. Only the faint red glow from somewhere deep below the horizon. I stood there for a long time, waiting for something to change. Nothing did. Eventually, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned. A man was walking up the road, same build, same face. He stopped a few feet away. "Are you Hin?" I asked. He nodded. "You or me? Which one are you?" The one that finally stopped asking. He looked past me toward the empty road, expressionless. "You'll take my place now?" "Doing what?" "Breathing." He walked past me, disappearing into the glow. I looked down at my hands. They were fading around the edges, light spilling through skin. My pulse slowed until I couldn't feel it anymore. But the hum continued, faint and steady, buried under the silence. Somewhere far above, or maybe below, I heard hospital monitors beep once. Someone said, "He's stable again." I smiled, or thought I did. Maybe that was what belief was for, giving the illusion that anything ends at all. The red glow pulsed one last time, brighter, wider, filling everything. And in that final moment, if there is such a thing, I understood. Hell wasn't fire or torment or judgment. It was the echo of breath that refuses to stop. It was the loop itself, and I'm still in it,